Darling Hammond. For nearly 4 decades, Linda Darling Hammond, professor of education and founder of the school redesign network at Stanford University, has provided extraordinary thought leadership on innovative and systematic ways to reform America's public education. At the heart of her work is a driving conviction to provide all children with a substantive and fair opportunity to learn.
And if you talk about the inequalities in the system, most people are shocked. Most people believe that America lives up to its rhetoric of equality.
Her high-impact accomplishments have influenced national education reform policy, as well as influenced schools of education and school districts across the country.
The United States cannot afford inequality any longer, if we ever could.
The Schott Foundation is pleased to present Linda Darling Hammond with a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Please help me in welcoming our Minister of Education, Dr. Linda Darling Hammond.
Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. They're the ones who's coming up, and the world is in their hands.
So how old do you have to be to get the Lifetime Achievement Award? It makes me feel, I do have a few things left in me, John.
Very good.
Now I have a love supreme going through my head now. A love supreme, a love supreme. That's where we have to go. Thank you, Reverend Moss. That was so inspiring. I am so honored to be in this company, in this auspicious company, where everyone here is a warrior for justice. This is really for everyone, from the grassroots, from the grass tops, from the treetops. I'm very grateful to John Jackson, who has really been a tireless warrior, dogged, leading this issue around opportunity to learn with grace, with humor, with unfailing commitment. And of course, I'm equally grateful to Greg Jobin Lees, whose investment in our children, in the Schott Foundation and all of its work, in the Campaign for Fiscal Equity in New York. There are a lot of people who are giving money to education. A surprisingly small amount of it goes to actually enhance equity in our schools. So thank you for leading that by example and the kind of resources all of our children deserve. I want to shout out to Jerry Palast, who is now leading CFE, to my colleagues here from the National Council for the Education of Black Children, who are also determinedly building literacy centers in communities and influencing policy on the national level, and so many others of you here. This really belongs to all of the children that we collectively serve. Probably for many of us, the fight for justice begins at home, but then it must go much further. And while I did my early teaching in Camden, New Jersey, where after 30 years of litigation, and I think David Ciara is here as well, one of the people who was fighting for that, it was in my early teaching where I saw what severe neglect, what Gloria Ladson-Billings calls aggressive neglect of children looks like in Camden, where less than half as much money was spent on the education of children as in Princeton and New Brunswick and other more affluent districts. And that really motivated me to do the kind of work that I later wanted to do in policy, because it was clear that while teachers can make a difference, and God bless every teacher who is here, I want to recognize every teacher or person who's ever been in teaching in this room. I am sick to my heart every time I hear the teacher bashing that goes on in the discourse these days. Every teacher deserves our respect. Every teacher deserves our honor. But we also have to do the work in the policy community, because the conditions in which good parenting can occur, good teaching can occur, good learning can occur, have to be structured there. So a lot of my work began in the home when I was lobbying for my first child to be the first black student in the gifted and talented program that led to the high status knowledge in Montgomery County School, where segregation in that northern state reserved that honor to mostly white and affluent students, to the time that I fought to keep my son out of the special education classes that so many young black men were being placed in. I could see, as many of you have, up close and personal, how the system organizes failure for so many children and denies access to the knowledge that we need to so many. But we must go beyond our fights for justice at home, and we have to do what Wildofsky said when he talked about what policy analysis is all about. He said it really has to be about speaking truth to power. It has to be about putting the cards on the table. And we have to be clear that we are not going to close the achievement gap until we close the opportunity gap. Every fall, I don't know how many of you saw that movie Home Alone. There's that moment the little boy wakes up and his family has gone on an airplane without him, and he goes like that, you know, oh my gosh. Well, every fall we have a Home Alone moment in the United States when the test scores come out. And the newspapers report that there's an achievement gap, and politicians all over the country go, we have an achievement gap. And then all kinds of ideas, are bandied about how we're going to, address this. But let me just say, many of those are fads. They are short-term ideas. They're not getting to the root of the problem. We're not going to close the opportunity gap while we are under-resourcing the schools that serve most of our low-income students of color. We are still spending half as much in places like Chicago as we are spending in the most wealthy suburbs, in Philadelphia as compared to Lower Merion, in Oakland as compared to Palo Alto. We are not going to close the opportunity gap while we're denying housing and health care to so many children and families. When we were with the people from Finland and Singapore, I was talking to one of the Finnish people, and he said, well, we don't really have homelessness in Finland. I said, well, what do you do when people, lose their jobs, lose their house? He said, we give them a house. We give them a place to live. We're not going to close the opportunity gap by paying teachers in high-need schools 30% less than those in wealthy districts, and then saying, and if you manage to work hard enough, we might give you a merit pay bonus someday. We're not going to close the opportunity class while they have class sizes of 40, as is common in Los Angeles, while those in the suburbs have class sizes of 20, and while they have the opportunity with their lower salaries to buy most of the books and supplies for their students. We are not going to close the opportunity gap by trying to solve that with a revolving door of novice teachers who come in and out of schools and districts, leaving instability in their wake. We are not going to close the opportunity gap by denying schools art, music, physical education, libraries, books, computers. And we are not going to close the opportunity gap by then threatening those teachers with firing and those schools with closing without making the investments in them and the children that they serve that they deserve. Charity is no substitute for justice. And we are not going to turn this around by starting a few more charter schools. And I am a co-founder of a charter school in a community near Stanford in East Palo Alto. And I know the power of starting innovative schools. We are now graduating and sending 90% of our kids to college in a community that was failing to graduate 2/3. But there are many district-run public schools doing equally well, and there are many charters that are doing badly. They're going to serve a few kids at the margins of the system, and we are not going to solve the problem without dealing with the system. So we need to demand for every child what children in middle-class communities have and what children in all communities in places like Finland and Singapore and other places have. Not flash-in-the-pan solutions, not innovations that come and go. We're going to innovate our way to failure if we don't build a system. We need to demand housing, health care, and food security for all families. We need solid, equitable funding for every school. We need high-quality early childhood education for every child. We need qualified, committed career teachers in every classroom. We need schools that can care for children effectively and offer them the kind of curriculum they need to be prepared for college and careers. And we need assessments that focus us on the kind of learning worth having that are used to improve and not to punish. And so in order to do this, we obviously cannot afford to wait for Superman. Each of us has to be a superhero ourselves. I see the Green Hornet over there and Batwoman over there. And we need to understand that it's going to take quite a lot of ongoing commitment of the sort that Cyrus Driver described for us, and a lot of courage. It is difficult to stand in the face of a tradition and a set of opinions that point in another direction. And Martin Luther King framed it for us, as he did so many things, very cogently when he noted that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? And expediency asks the question, is it politic? And vanity comes along and asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him that it is right. And for all of you who every day make that decision because it is right, we all owe you our thanks. Money wields power, but conscience produces a greater power. And again, to close with what King said, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands in the way of love. A love supreme. Let us continue to implement the demands of justice and correct everything that stands in the way of love. Thank you for all the work that you are doing.